I learned that morning that my life was about to become a bureaucratic nightmare, and it all started with 8 inches of unexpected March snow and a phone call from a woman named Karen Foster. The snow had hit northern Montana hard that year, dumping more powder on our rural stretch outside of Kalispell than we had seen in a decade. I was out by my property line, about 50 yards from my main house, assembling what I had been planning for weeks, a proper snow shelter storage building. Nothing fancy, just a solid 12 by 16 structure where I could keep my snowmobile, snow blower, and winter equipment protected from the elements. My name is Patrick Jennings, and I have owned my 40-acre property on Mountain View Road for the past 15 years. I bought it specifically because it was remote, peaceful, and most importantly, not part of any homeowner association. That last part turned out to be more complicated than I thought. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled off my work gloves and answered. "Hello, is this Patrick Jennings?" The voice was sharp, clipped, and carried the unmistakable tone of someone who was used to getting their way. Speaking. "Who is this?" "This is Karen Foster, president of the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowner Association. I am calling because we have received multiple complaints about unauthorized construction on your property." I looked around my land, confused. "I think you have the wrong number. I am not part of any HOA. Your property directly borders our subdivision," she continued, ignoring my statement. "And according to our bylaws, any construction visible from Pine Ridge Estates must be approved by our Architectural Review Committee. Your structure violates our aesthetic guidelines." I felt my jaw tighten. "Madam, with all due respect, my property is not part of your HOA. I checked all of that before I bought this land. I can build whatever I want on my own property as long as it meets county codes. The covenant clearly states that properties within 500 feet of our subdivision boundaries are subject to our oversight for structures visible from our community." "That is not legally possible," I said, my voice getting harder. "You cannot enforce HOA rules on property that is not part of your association. I never signed any agreement with Pine Ridge Estates. We will be sending you a formal cease and desist letter. If you do not comply, we will pursue legal action. Good day, Mr. Jennings." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in the snow, phone in hand, trying to process what had just happened. Pine Ridge Estates was a subdivision of about 30 homes that had been built 7 years ago, right next to my property. The developer had approached me about selling my land, but I refused. I liked my space and my independence. They built their little suburb anyway, and for years we coexisted without issue. Their residents used Mountain View Road to access the main highway, the same private road that I owned and maintained. It was the only way in and out of their subdivision because the developer had been too cheap to build a proper access road from the highway directly to their community. That was the key detail that would matter later. I went back to work on my shelter, figuring Karen Foster was bluffing. The structure was completely legal according to Flathead County building codes. I had pulled the proper permits, and the county inspector had already done the initial foundation inspection. Everything was above board. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived. The cease and desist was real, printed on expensive letterstock with the Pine Ridge Estates logo at the top. It demanded that I immediately stop construction and submit plans to their Architectural Review Committee for approval. It threatened fines of $500 per day for non-compliance and legal action to force demolition of any unapproved structures. I called my lawyer, a guy named Tom Mitchell who had handled my property purchase years ago. He laughed when I read him the letter. "Patrick, they have absolutely no authority over your property," Tom said. This is a scare tactic. HOAs pull this stuff sometimes, trying to extend their reach beyond their actual jurisdiction. Just ignore it. Should I respond at all? I will draft a letter explaining that your property is not subject to their covenants and that any further harassment will be considered just that, harassment. But honestly, they will probably back off once they realize you are serious. Tom was wrong. The following week, I came home from running errands in Kalispell to find Karen Foster standing in my driveway with two other people. One was a balding man in his 50s wearing a polo shirt with the Pine Ridge Estates logo embroidered on it. The other was a younger woman, maybe 30, holding a clipboard and looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Jennings," Karen said as I got out of my truck, "we need to discuss this situation face to face." "There is nothing to discuss," I said. "My lawyer already sent you a letter explaining that you have no authority here. This is Dale Montgomery, our HOA vice president, and Jennifer Clark, our secretary. We are here representing the entire community." Dale stepped forward, trying to look authoritative. "Look, Patrick, we can work this out like reasonable people. All we are asking is that you paint your structure to match the color palette approved for our community and maybe add some landscaping to make it less of an eyesore." An eyesore. It is not even finished yet, and more importantly, it is none of your business. This is my property. Karen pulled out her phone and showed me photos. Someone had been taking pictures of my build from inside the subdivision. This industrial-looking monstrosity is bringing down our property values. We have invested a great deal of money in maintaining a certain standard in Pine Ridge Estates. "Then you should have bought my land when you had the chance," I said. "I own this property free and clear, and your HOA rules do not apply here. Now please leave before I call the sheriff for trespassing." Jennifer, the secretary, spoke up quietly. "Maybe we could reach some kind of compromise. What if we helped with costs if you made some modifications?" "I do not want your money and I do not want your input," I said firmly. "I want you off my property." Now, Dale puffed up his chest. "You know we control access to Mountain View Road, right? That is within our subdivision boundaries." I smiled then, because he had just made a critical mistake. "Actually, Dale, you do not. Mountain View Road is a private road. I own it. I have owned it since I bought this property. Your developer negotiated an easement with me 15 years ago that allows your residents to use it for access. But the road itself and all maintenance responsibilities belong to me." The three of them exchanged glances. Clearly, they had not known this. "Check your property records," I continued. "The road is entirely on my land. I have been maintaining it out of my own pocket for 15 years. Plowing it in winter, grading it in summer, filling potholes, everything. The only reason your subdivision has access to the highway is because I allow it and because I keep that road passable." Karen's face had gone red. "That is absurd. That road is used by our entire community." "It must be a public easement." "It is a private easement," I corrected. "There is a difference. Now get off my property before I call law enforcement." They left, but Karen turned back at her car. "This is not over, Patrick." I watched them drive away and felt a knot forming in my stomach. I had dealt with difficult people before, but there was something about the self-righteous entitlement of an HOA board that was particularly infuriating. Construction on my snow shelter continued. I worked on it most weekends and some evenings after my job at the lumber mill. The walls went up, the roof trusses were installed, and I started on the metal roofing. It was honest work, and I was proud of what I was building. Then the county inspector showed up unexpectedly for what should have been a routine framing inspection. He walked around the structure, checking things off on his tablet, but he seemed uncomfortable. "Everything looking good, Hank?" I asked. Hank Morrison had been the county building inspector for 20 years. We had worked together on several projects over the years. "Patrick, I have got to be straight with you. I have been getting calls from someone at Pine Ridge Estates. They are filing complaints about your build, saying it does not match the plans you submitted." "What? That is ridiculous. Everything is exactly according to the plans I submitted." Hank nodded. "I know, I checked. Your build is perfect, code compliant, matches your permits exactly, but they are being persistent. They have called the county office 6 times this week." "Can they do that? Just file false complaints?" "Anyone can file a complaint. We are required to investigate each one. I am just giving you a heads up that they are making noise." He signed off on the inspection. "You are good to proceed. But watch yourself with these HOA people. I have seen them cause problems for folks before." That night, I did some research on Pine Ridge Estates and their HOA. What I found was disturbing. They had a history of aggressive enforcement, even within their own community. I found posts on local Facebook groups from Pine Ridge residents complaining about fines for leaving trash, cans visible from the street, for planting flowers that were not on the approved list, for parking their own vehicles in their own driveways. One resident had been fined $3,000 for painting their front door navy blue instead of the approved slate blue. These were not reasonable people. They were petty tyrants who enjoyed wielding what little power they had. 2 weeks later, I received another letter. This time, it was from a law firm in Kalispell, Brennan, Walsh, and Associates. They represented Pine Ridge Estates HOA and were demanding that I cease construction immediately and submit to binding arbitration regarding my property. The letter was 6 pages of legal jargon, but the threat was clear. They were preparing to sue me. I called Tom Mitchell again. "They have hired Brennan and Walsh." Tom whistled. "That is a big firm, expensive. They are serious. Can they actually sue me? They can sue anybody for anything. Whether they will win is another question. Your property is not part of their HOA. That is settled fact. But litigation is expensive and time-consuming, even when you are in the right. So what do I do?" "We respond that you are not subject to their authority and that any legal action will be frivolous. We can also countersue for harassment if it comes to that. But Patrick, I have to be honest with you. If they are willing to spend the money, they can drag this out for years. It might cost you tens of thousands in legal fees, even if you win." I sat in my kitchen that evening, looking at the unfinished snow shelter through my window, and felt a burning anger. I had not done anything wrong. I had followed every rule, gotten every permit, and built on my own land. And yet these people were trying to control what I did with my own property simply because they thought they could. That was when I had the idea. It was petty, I knew that. But it was also completely legal and within my rights. The next morning, I called Tom. "The easement agreement for Mountain View Road, what exactly does it say?" "Let me pull it up." I heard him typing. "Okay, here it is. You grant access to Mountain View Road for ingress and egress to properties within Pine Ridge Estates Subdivision. The easement does not include any requirement that you maintain the road. In fact, it specifically states that maintenance is your responsibility and discretion. So I have no legal obligation to maintain that road, correct? You have been doing it out of goodwill, essentially. The easement just means you cannot block their access, but you do not have to keep it in good condition. What happens if I just stop maintaining it?" There was a pause. "That is an interesting question. Legally, you would be within your rights. They have access to the road, which is all the easement guarantees. If the road becomes difficult to use because you are not maintaining it, that is not a violation of the easement. So if I stopped plowing it in winter, stopped filling potholes, just let it become a mess." Patrick, I understand why you are thinking this way, but that is a nuclear option. That will escalate this situation significantly. They already escalated it. They hired an expensive law firm to harass me over a legal building project. I am just exercising my property rights. Tom sighed. If you are seriously considering this, document everything. Keep records of their harassment, the legal threats, all of it. If this goes to court, you want to show that you were pushed to this point. I thanked him and hung up. Then I walked outside and looked at Mountain View Road. It was a quarter-mile stretch of private road that connected Pine Ridge Estates to Highway 93. I had paved it 5 years ago at my own expense, nearly $20,000. I had been plowing it every winter for 15 years, getting up at 5 in the morning to clear it before people needed to go to work. I had filled countless potholes, hauled gravel, and maintained it better than the county maintained most public roads. And I was done. The very next day, I received a notice that Pine Ridge Estates HOA was filing suit against me in Flathead County District Court. They were asking for an injunction to halt my construction and to force me to submit to their architectural review process. They were also asking for $15,000 in damages for harm to their property values. I called Tom and told him about my decision. He agreed to represent me in the lawsuit and to send a letter to the HOA informing them that I would no longer be maintaining Mountain View Road. This is going to get ugly, Tom warned. It already is ugly. I am just evening the playing field. The letter went out on a Friday afternoon. By Saturday morning, my phone was ringing. Karen Foster, of course. What do you mean you are not going to maintain the road anymore? She demanded. Exactly what it says. Mountain View Road is my private property. I have been maintaining it as a courtesy, but given the legal harassment I am facing from your HOA, I have decided to discontinue that courtesy. You cannot do that. That road is essential access for our entire community. Then perhaps your community should not have sued the person who has been maintaining it for free for 15 years. This is extortion. No, this is property rights. You have access to the road as required by the easement. I am just not maintaining it anymore. If Pine Ridge Estates wants to maintain it, you are welcome to petition me for permission to work on my property. This is outrageous. You cannot hold an entire subdivision hostage because of your petty grudge. I am not holding anyone hostage. I am simply stopping a voluntary service I have been providing. You can use the road. It just might not be as smooth as you are used to. She hung up on me. I expected that would not be the last I heard from them. March turned into April and the final snows of the season arrived. Normally, I would have been out at dawn with my plow truck, clearing Mountain View Road so the Pine Ridge residents could get to work. Instead, I stayed in bed and drank my coffee while I watched the snow pile up. By mid-morning, the road had 6 inches of fresh snow on it. I saw the first vehicle from Pine Ridge try to navigate it, a small sedan that got about 50 feet before it slid into the ditch. The driver, a man I recognized as one of the residents, got out and stared at his car, then up toward my house. He pulled out his phone. 20 minutes later, Karen Foster's SUV came charging up the unplowed road, fishtailing slightly but making it through with 4-wheel drive. She stopped in my driveway and stormed up to my door, pounding on it. I opened it slowly. "Good morning, Karen. Mr. Montgomery's car is in the ditch because you did not plow the road. Mr. Montgomery should have driven more carefully in snowy conditions. You have always plowed this road. Our residents depend on it. I used to plow it when I was on good terms with Pine Ridge Estates. But since your HOA decided to sue me and threaten me with legal action over a legal construction project, I have decided my time and money are better spent elsewhere. You are doing this out of spite. I am exercising my property rights. The same rights your HOA is trying to take away from me. We will sue you for this too. For what? Not maintaining my own private road. Go ahead. My lawyer would love that case. She stood there shaking with anger, then turned and marched back to her SUV. She had trouble getting back up the snowy road, spinning her tires several times before finally making it. Over the next few weeks, Mountain View Road became increasingly problematic for Pine Ridge residents. The spring thaw created deep ruts and potholes that I would normally have filled. Instead, I left them. Residents started complaining to the county, but the county explained that it was a private road and outside their jurisdiction. Some residents tried to take matters into their own hands, filling potholes with bags of gravel from the hardware store. But they were not equipped to handle the scope of the problem. The road was deteriorating rapidly, and without proper maintenance, it was only going to get worse. I continued work on my snow shelter. The roof was complete, and I was installing the doors and windows. It looked good, a solid, functional building that would serve me well for decades. I made sure every detail was perfect, knowing that it was probably going to be scrutinized in court. The lawsuit moved slowly through the system. Tom filed our response, arguing that the court had no jurisdiction because my property was not part of the HOA, and that the HOA had no standing to sue. The HOA's lawyers responded with hundreds of pages of documents, trying to argue that because my property bordered their subdivision, I had an implied obligation to follow their rules. It was nonsense, but expensive nonsense. In early May, I received a call from a Pine Ridge resident I had never met. His name was Robert Chen, and he sounded frustrated but polite. "Mr. Jennings, I hope you do not mind me calling you directly. I got your number from the county property records. I am a resident of Pine Ridge Estates, and I wanted to talk to you about the road situation. I am listening. I understand there is a dispute between you and the HOA. I do not know all the details, and frankly, I try to stay out of HOA drama, but the road is becoming a real problem. My wife is pregnant, and I am worried about what happens if we have an emergency and cannot get an ambulance in because the road is so bad." That hit me differently than Karen Foster's angry demands. This was a legitimate concern from someone who was not part of the problem. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate you reaching out civilly. The situation is this. I have been maintaining that road at my own expense for 15 years. Your HOA decided to sue me because they do not like the appearance of a completely legal building on my property. I am not maintaining the road anymore because I see no reason to provide a free service to people who are actively trying to harm me. I understand. And for what it is worth, a lot of us in the subdivision think the HOA is being ridiculous. I voted against the lawsuit. But the board does what it wants. Then maybe your community needs a new board. That is harder than you would think. Karen Foster has been president for 4 years. She runs unopposed because no one else wants the headache. But Mr. Jennings, is there any way we can work something out? What if the HOA dropped the lawsuit? That would be a start. But I would also want a formal written apology and a guarantee that they will never try to enforce their rules on my property again. Let me talk to some of the other residents. Maybe we can pressure the board to back down." He hung up, and I felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe reasonable people could prevail. That hope was short-lived. 2 days later, I received notice that the HOA was filing an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order, asking the court to force me to maintain the road until the lawsuit was resolved. They argued that my failure to maintain the road was causing immediate harm to residents and creating a public safety hazard. Tom called me as soon as he got the notice. They are really pushing this hard. The hearing is scheduled for next week. Can they actually force me to maintain my own road? It is unlikely, but not impossible. They are going to argue that you are retaliating against them in a way that harms innocent third parties. The judge might order temporary maintenance if they believe there is a genuine safety issue. So I could be forced to provide free labor and services to people who are suing me. That is what they are asking for. We will fight it, but I wanted you to be prepared. The hearing was held on a Tuesday morning in Kalispell. I drove into town wearing my best clothes, which were not very fancy clean jeans, a button-down shirt, and work boots. Karen Foster and the rest of the HOA board were there in business attire, along with their attorney, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s named Linda Brennan. Judge Martin Ashford presided. He was an older man, probably in his 60s, with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. Brennan went first, presenting photos of the deteriorating road, affidavits from residents describing difficulties with access, and even a statement from the fire department expressing concern about emergency vehicle access. She painted me as a vindictive property owner who was endangering an entire community over a petty dispute. Your Honor, she concluded, Mr. Jennings has maintained this road for 15 years. The residents of Pine Ridge Estates have come to rely on that maintenance for their health and safety. His sudden cessation of maintenance, timed precisely with our legitimate legal action, demonstrates clear retaliatory intent. We ask that the court order him to continue maintenance pending resolution of the underlying dispute. Tom stood up for our side. Your Honor, Mountain View Road is Mr. Jennings's private property. The easement granted to Pine Ridge Estates explicitly does not require him to maintain it. He has been doing so voluntarily, at considerable personal expense, for 15 years. The HOA is now suing him, making frivolous claims about his authority over his own property, and simultaneously demanding that he continue providing them with free services. This is not a matter for court intervention. This is a matter of property rights. What about the safety concerns? The judge asked. Your Honor, the road is passable. It is not comfortable, but it is passable. Residents can access their homes. Emergency vehicles can get through. They might have to slow down, but they can get through. The HOA is trying to use the court to force my client to subsidize their access while they sue him. That is not appropriate. Judge Ashford leaned back in his chair. Mr. Jennings, I want to hear from you directly. Why did you stop maintaining the road? I stood up. Your Honor, I stopped maintaining it because the HOA is suing me for building a legal structure on my own property. They are trying to impose their rules on land they do not own. I have followed every law, gotten every permit, and done everything right. And their response is to threaten me with fines and legal action. I do not believe I should be forced to provide free services to people who are trying to harm me. So this is retaliation. It is self-preservation, Your Honor. That road costs me thousands of dollars a year to maintain. I did it as a good neighbor, but the HOA has made it clear we are not neighbors, we are adversaries. I am just exercising my property rights. The judge thought for a long moment. Here is my ruling. Mr. Jennings is correct that he has no legal obligation to maintain the road. The easement does not require it, and I will not order him to do so. However, I am concerned about the safety issues raised by the HOA. Mr. Jennings, you may not obstruct access to the road in any way. The residents must be able to use it, even if it is not well maintained. As for the underlying lawsuit, we will address that at the scheduled hearing in July. This motion for a temporary restraining order is denied. Karen Foster looked like she wanted to explode. Her attorney whispered something to her, and she reluctantly nodded. We left the courthouse and Tom clapped me on the shoulder. That was a good outcome. The judge saw right through their argument. But the lawsuit is still going forward. Yes, but we are in a strong position. Be patient. Patience was not my strong suit, but I did not have much choice. June arrived, bringing warmer weather and turning Mountain View Road into a muddy mess. The spring runoff created deep ruts and puddles that made the road look more like a trail through a swamp than a proper access road. Residents of Pine Ridge Estates were increasingly frustrated, and several more of them reached out to me, asking if we could find a compromise. I told them all the same thing: talk to your HOA board. Meanwhile, my snow shelter was complete. It looked fantastic, a well-built structure that matched my property perfectly. I moved my snowmobile and equipment into it and felt a deep satisfaction. I had built something good despite all the harassment and threats. The county inspector did his final inspection and signed off on everything. Beautiful work, Patrick. You should be proud. Thank you, Hank. I am. Still dealing with the HOA nonsense, going to trial in July. He shook his head. What a waste of everyone's time and money. Good luck to you. In late June, something interesting happened. Robert Chen called me again. Mr. Jennings, I wanted to give you an update. A group of us residents have been organizing. We are fed up with Karen Foster and the way she runs the HOA. We are pushing for a special election to recall the board. Seriously. The lawsuit against you was the last straw for a lot of people. We are spending HOA funds on a pointless legal battle while our own roads inside the subdivision need repair, while common areas are being neglected, while actual community needs are ignored. Karen is more interested in controlling what everyone does than in actually improving the neighborhood. How many people are on board? We need 20% of homeowners to petition for a special election. We have got almost 30% already. The vote will happen in 2 weeks. That is great news, Robert. I hope it works out. Even if we get rid of the board, I cannot promise the new board will drop the lawsuit immediately, but at least we will have people in charge who are willing to be reasonable. 2 weeks later, Robert called me with the results. We did it. Karen Foster, Dale Montgomery, and Jennifer Clark were all recalled. We have got a new board coming in. Congratulations. Who is the new president? A guy named Marcus Hill. He is an engineer, very practical, not interested in drama. He has already said he wants to meet with you to discuss resolving the situation. 3 days before the scheduled trial, Marcus Hill called me. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Kalispell, neutral territory. Marcus was a tall black man in his 40s with an easy smile and a firm handshake. Patrick, thanks for meeting with me. I want to start by apologizing for the way this situation has been handled. The previous board went way over the line. I appreciate that. I have reviewed all the documents, talked to our attorney, and looked at the easement agreement for the road. Bottom line, you are right. We have no authority over your property and the lawsuit is baseless. I have already instructed Linda Brennan to file a motion to dismiss with prejudice, meaning we cannot refile the same claims. I felt tension I had been carrying for months start to release. That is good to hear. Now, about the road. I understand why you stopped maintaining it and you are within your rights. But I need to be honest with you, it is causing real problems for our residents, and some of them are your neighbors who had nothing to do with the lawsuit. Robert Chen made the same point. Here is what I would like to propose. The HOA will formally apologize to you in writing. We will include a covenant in our bylaws explicitly stating that we have no authority over your property, and will never attempt to enforce our rules outside our subdivision boundaries. In exchange, would you be willing to resume maintaining the road? At my own expense? Actually, no. I have been looking into this. The HOA has reserve funds. We could pay you a reasonable annual fee to maintain the road. Not a huge amount, but enough to cover your time and expenses. That way, it is a service contract rather than you doing us a favor. I thought about it. How much are we talking? I was thinking $5,000 a year. That should cover materials, equipment, wear, and your time. We pay it quarterly, and either party can terminate the agreement with 90 days' notice. $5,000 a year would actually more than cover my costs. I spent maybe $3,000 on road maintenance in an average year. It would essentially pay me for the work I had been doing for free. What about the legal fees I have incurred? I am into this for about $8,000 so far with my attorney. Marcus nodded. The HOA will reimburse your legal fees in full. It is the least we can do. And Karen Foster no longer has any authority in Pine Ridge Estates. She has been making noise about fighting the recall, but it was conducted properly and it is binding. I extended my hand. You have got a deal. We shook on it. Marcus drafted a formal agreement over the next week and both sides signed. The lawsuit was dismissed. The HOA formally apologized, and I received a check for $8,000 to cover my legal fees. The first quarterly payment of $1,250 for road maintenance arrived shortly after. I resumed plowing and maintaining Mountain View Road. It felt different now, though. I was not doing it as a favor, I was doing it as a paid service provider. The relationship between me and Pine Ridge Estates had changed from neighborly goodwill to a professional arrangement, which honestly felt more appropriate given everything that had happened. Karen Foster, predictably, was not happy. I saw her a few times around Kalispell, and she would glare at me with undisguised hatred. She tried to spread rumors that I had blackmailed the HOA, but most people knew the truth. She had abused her power, and the community had held her accountable. In August, I heard through Robert Chen that Karen had put her house up for sale. She cannot stand that she does not run things anymore, Robert told me. Good riddance, honestly. The new board has been great. We have actually been fixing things, planning community events, focusing on stuff that matters. I am glad it worked out. So are we, and Patrick, thanks for being willing to work with us. Marcus said you could have played hardball and demanded a lot more money or just refused to maintain the road out of spite. I appreciate that you were reasonable. I was never trying to hurt regular residents. I just was not going to let your old HOA board push me around. That fall, I used some of the money I had saved from the road maintenance payments to add solar panels to my snow shelter. It was completely off-grid now, with its own power supply. I also built a small workshop extension where I could work on projects during the winter. The whole complex looked great, functional, and well-designed. Everything I had wanted it to be. One October morning, I was out working in the snow shelter when I heard a vehicle pull into my driveway. I walked out to see a sheriff's deputy vehicle. My stomach tightened. Had Karen done something crazy? The deputy who got out was Jim Randall, someone I had gone to high school with. "Hey, Patrick, just need to talk to you for a few minutes. Nothing serious." "What is going on, Jim?" "We got a complaint from a Karen Foster. She is alleging that you have been harassing her and that you vandalized her property. I have got to follow up on any complaint, but between you and me, I have already talked to several of her neighbors, and they say she is making it up. I have not been anywhere near her property. I do not even know where she lives." That is what I figured. She showed me some photos of spray paint on her garage door. Someone wrote HOA Tyrant in red paint. But the thing is, 3 of her neighbors have Ring cameras, and none of them show anyone approaching her house when she claims it happened. Also, the handwriting looks suspiciously similar to some notes we found that she wrote herself. so she vandalized her own property. That is what it looks like. I think she is trying to get back at you for the whole HOA situation. Problem is, filing a false police report is a crime. I am going to have to investigate her now. Jim, I do not want to press charges or anything. I just want to be left alone. I understand. But if she filed a false report, that is a matter for the county attorney, not you. I will handle it professionally. Just wanted you to know what is going on. 2 weeks later, I heard that Karen Foster had been charged with filing a false police report and criminal mischief for the vandalism. She ended up pleading guilty to a reduced charge and paying a fine. Her house sold in November and she moved to Missoula. I never saw her again. Life gradually returned to normal. Winter came, and I was back to plowing Mountain View Road, but now I was getting paid for it. My snow shelter performed beautifully, keeping my equipment protected from the harsh Montana winter. The HOA and I maintained a cordial, professional relationship. Marcus Hill was a good HOA president, focused on actual community improvement rather than petty power trips. Tom Mitchell called me in December. I have been thinking about your case, Patrick. You know, it would make a good law school example. Property rights, HOA overreach, easement law, all of it. As long as I do not have to live through it again. I think you are safe. Word has gotten around in the HOA community about what happened. I have had 3 clients in the past month dealing with similar HOA overreach, and in each case, the HOA backed down when they heard about your situation. You might have actually changed how some of these organizations operate. I just wanted to build a snow shelter. I know. But sometimes standing up for your rights has broader implications. You should be proud of what you did. The following spring, I was contacted by a reporter from the Flathead Beacon, the local newspaper. They wanted to do a story about HOA disputes and property rights, using my case as an example. I was hesitant at first, but Tom encouraged me to do it. The article came out in April, a well-researched piece about the tension between HOAs and individual property rights, featuring my story prominently. It was fair and balanced, showing both sides of the issue while making it clear that the Pine Ridge Estates HOA had overstepped their authority. The article included comments from Marcus Hill, who praised the current working relationship between the HOA and me, and even included a statement from several Pine Ridge residents who said they were happier with the new board. Karen Foster was mentioned briefly, including the fact that she had been charged with filing a false police report. The article noted that she had declined to be interviewed. The story got picked up by a few statewide news outlets and even made it to some national property rights advocacy websites. I started getting emails from people around the country who were dealing with similar HOA issues, asking for advice. I tried to respond to as many as I could, usually telling them to document everything, know their property rights, and get a good lawyer. One email that particularly stuck with me was from a man in Colorado who was being sued by his HOA for installing solar panels on his roof. He had read about my case and said it gave him courage to fight back. He eventually won his case, and he sent me a photo of his completed solar installation with a thank you note. That felt good, knowing that my frustrating experience had helped someone else. By the summer, life had fully settled into a new normal. I was working at the lumber mill, maintaining Mountain View Road for pay, and enjoying my property. The snow shelter had proven its worth through the winter, and I was already planning additional improvements for the next year. Robert Chen and his wife had their baby in June, a healthy girl they named Emma. He sent me a photo and a message. Thanks for working things out with the HOA. Made my wife feel a lot better knowing we would have good road access for emergencies. That reminded me that real people, not just legal principles, had been affected by the dispute. In August, Marcus Hill called me. "Patrick, I wanted to give you a heads up. We are having our annual HOA meeting next week, and the membership wants to give you an award for your road maintenance work. I know that might feel a little weird given the history, but people genuinely appreciate what you do." "An award from the HOA that sued me. That is ironic," Marcus laughed. "I know, but it is a new board, a new attitude. You do not have to accept if you do not want to, but I think it would mean something to the community." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to refuse out of principle, but another part of me recognized that the residents of Pine Ridge Estates were not my enemies. Most of them had nothing to do with the lawsuit and had been caught in the middle of a power struggle. "Okay, I will come." The meeting was held in the community center, a small building in the middle of the subdivision. About 40 residents attended, which Marcus told me was a record turnout. They conducted their regular business budget reports, maintenance updates, discussion of community events, and then Marcus called me up to the front. "I want to take a moment to recognize Patrick Jennings," he said. "Many of you know the history here. The previous HOA board made some mistakes in how they dealt with Patrick. The current board has worked hard to repair that relationship. Patrick maintains Mountain View Road, our primary access route, and does so reliably and professionally. He plows at dawn after every snowstorm. He fills potholes. He keeps the roads safe and passable. On behalf of Pine Ridge Estates, we want to present you with this plaque in appreciation for your service to our community." The plaque read, "Presented to Patrick Jennings in recognition of dedicated service maintaining Mountain View Road, Pine Ridge Estates Community, August 2026. People applauded. Several residents came up afterward to shake my hand and thank me personally. An older woman named Dorothy mentioned that she had mobility issues and that my regular road maintenance made it possible for her to get to medical appointments reliably. A young couple thanked me for keeping the road safe for their kids' school bus. These were not faceless HOA members. They were my neighbors, people just trying to live their lives. The dispute with Karen Foster and her board had been about principle and property rights, but in the end, it was also about community and how people treat each other. I drove home that evening with the plaque on my passenger seat and felt something I had not expected: closure. The situation had been frustrating, expensive, and stressful. But it had also taught me valuable lessons about standing up for yourself, about the importance of property rights, and about the difference between reasonable people and petty tyrants. My snow shelter stood solid and strong on my property, exactly where I wanted it, looking exactly how I wanted it to look. No HOA permission, no architectural review, no compromise on my vision. It was a symbol of individual liberty and property rights, and every time I looked at it, I felt a sense of pride and satisfaction. That fall, I got a call from Tom Mitchell. "You are going to love this. Remember Linda Brennan, the attorney who represented the HOA against you, unfortunately. Her firm just took on another HOA case, a similar situation where an HOA is trying to extend their authority beyond their jurisdiction. But this time, they are representing the property owner against the HOA. I talked to Linda at a bar association event, and she said your case was a wake-up call for her. She realized how much damage HOAs can do when they overreach, and she decided she would rather fight for property owners than for petty bureaucrats. That is surprisingly satisfying to hear. Change happens in small ways sometimes. You fighting back did not just protect your own rights, it probably helped other people too. As winter approached again, I prepared for another season of maintaining Mountain View Road. The quarterly checks from the HOA continued to arrive on time. The new board was professional and responsive. When I needed to order a large load of gravel for road repairs, Marcus approved the extra expense without hassle. It was how things should have been from the beginning, a mutually beneficial arrangement between reasonable people. I saw the snow starting to accumulate in late October and felt ready. My plow truck was serviced and ready to go. My snow shelter was stocked with equipment and supplies. My property was mine, managed according to my own decisions and priorities, free from the control of people who had no authority over it. Karen Foster was gone, her attempt to extend her petty fiefdom beyond its borders defeated by basic property law and common sense. The residents of Pine Ridge Estates had a functional HOA board that focused on serving their community rather than controlling it. And I had learned that sometimes you have to fight for your rights, even when it is expensive and difficult and frustrating. One December morning, after plowing Mountain View Road following a heavy snowfall, I stood in my driveway and watched the sun rise over the mountains. My property, my snow shelter, my road maintenance business, all of it was the result of standing firm on principle. The lawsuit had cost me time, money, and stress, but it had also proven something important: that individual property rights matter, that HOAs are not all-powerful, and that reasonable people can find reasonable solutions when petty tyrants are removed from power. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Robert Chen. "Road looks great. Thanks for being out there early. Emma slept through the plowing. She is getting used to the sound." I smiled and texted back, "Glad to help. Stay warm." That was the real victory, I realized. Not the legal win, not the money, not even the completed snow shelter. The real victory was being able to live on my own property according to my own terms while still being a good neighbor to people who deserved it. The real victory was proving that you do not have to choose between standing up for your rights and being part of a community. You can do both, as long as you are dealing with reasonable people. The snow continued to fall, blanketing northern Montana in white. I climbed into my warm truck and headed down to the lumber mill for my shift, passing my snow shelter on the way out, solid and perfect in the winter morning light. Everything I had fought for, everything I had built, exactly the way it was supposed to be. Not because an HOA approved it, but because it was my property and my right to build it. Sometimes the best endings are not dramatic, they are simply a return to normal, to the way things should have been all along. Karen Foster's tyrannical overreach had been defeated. Property rights had been upheld. And life in rural Montana continued, with snow-covered mountains, hard-working people, and the fundamental American principle that a person's property is their own to manage as they see fit. That was enough. That was everything.